shortly, including a full newspaper interview coming out, which is in place for this Sunday, and by the end of it, Philip will have moved on with dignity. So it's all been orchestrated. That it has been done as a way of putting the lid on it, if you like, and enabling him to do whatever it is he wants to do as a result of this. And we've got lots as well. There's an article here on the same page in the Mail, down the side by Andrew Pearce, who's one of
because this is the Sun here, isn't it? So there's also a double page spread in the Mail as well. That you're right.
Yeah, and about the benefits of coming out and how hard it was for Andrew to come out at 22 in 1982 on a housing estate where there were no other openly gay people. And we're now in the 21st century, and it isn't as difficult as that. But you have to remember as well, there are people in ultra-conservative, ultra-religious homes whose families are not going to react well to this, who are incredibly conflicted. And I don't know how many of them are going to find their position improved or their outlook on life improved because a rich white man who's running no risks by saying what he's saying has come out. And not to denigrate what he's done, but
well, no, because it's still a brave move by him.
It's a brave move by him, but it's not potentially as risky as if, you know, you're from a different background.
This is all over social media. This is all, you turn on Netflix now, you see gay couples in every series you want to watch. You can't escape the fact that the reality that gay men and women exist and can lead quite happy, successful lives, and that is a wonderful thing.
Okay, we're going to move on. That was in the Sun. It says the Mail there, but there's also a double page spread in the Mail as well, so you know. Let's just move on to one other issue, shall we, before we go to the break, and this is about the cabinet reshuffle that we're expecting next week. There's the front of the Telegraph. They're expecting next week. There's the front of the Telegraph. They're leading with the fact that Andrea Leadsom has had something to say about women in boards and the importance of women's representation ahead of this reshuffle. Perhaps trying to put pressure on the Prime Minister.
There's been lots of briefing, predominantly by male wannabe ministers, about how the female current ministers will all be knifed in a Valentine's Day massacre, is how it's been referred to. It's also being said here that that may be watered down. It may be as few as 6 posts actually get changed in the reshuffle. Boris Johnson wants to do it all in one day. Andrea Leadsom is saying, now look, you must have equality. It must be the norm. We've got a third of women on FTSE 100 boards now who are there, and that's still not good enough, but it's better than nothing, and it should be the same within government. And there's also some talk here that he's going to perhaps demote women from cabinet, from jobs of Secretary of State, but going to take the sting out of the tail by promoting women elsewhere within government in more junior posts. So
is that
moving some women out of seniority?
Slightly confusing headline in the Times. This is page, is it 14? I can't read my...
Yes,
I can't focus.
Page 15.
Poised to spare women from chop-in reshuffle. Is there a suggestion that the cabinet, some women may lose their jobs, and in the wider government...
If they wear red jumpers, they stay in the job.
I mean,
it's a good rule.
It's talking about that lady there's Lucy Fraser QC. It's talking about her becoming replacing Geoffrey Cox and promoting the likes of Penny Mordaunt, who used to be Defence Secretary.
And obviously we don't know if that's true.
We don't know if that's true. Yeah, exactly. These are all obviously...
And Jacob Rees-Mogg has to go because no one's seen him for very long. He's gone into Philip Schofield's closet that he's left. And
only was it today we had the announcement?
Nothing to do with...
Nothing like that, sorry.
Yes.
Karen Pierce has become our lady in Washington. She's now the ambassador for this country to the US, and that is a really senior position. Women are doing really, really well. I think that my concern is that with all this talk about how we need more female representation on these boards and in cabinet, we're not talking about the fact that in the workplace, women are doing really well, and I'm surrounded by 2 fantastic examples right now. That's the story I want to hear.
Great. Right, well, we're both slightly shocked at that, so that's why there was that rather long pause. We are going to take a break right now. Plenty more to talk about coming up after the break, including the virus that is spreading across the world, but what effect is it having on the economy? We're going to be talking about that in just a moment. And we're going to turn inside the Financial Times because they're focusing on the coronavirus, which we've all been talking a lot about, and lots of the newspapers have as well. There's an article here by John Redwood about the impact on the markets, and elsewhere in the paper there's a story about how it could weigh on the global economy as well.
Yeah, it's not just an issue of who has this virus and how you deal with the illness. There are 100 million Chinese people who travelled home for the Chinese New Year who are now unable to get back to where they work. So the Chinese economy is having a real moment. And Fiat Chrysler has warned this week that one of its European plants could be forced to halt production within a fortnight because so much stuff in terms of the global supply chain, things that are produced, that are parts that are consumed elsewhere in the world, come out from China or go through China, that if they don't go to work for a period, actually there's a massive knock-on effect to factories, to production, to consumption, to tourism. A lot of Chinese tourists who go around the world, spend a lot of money, cause a lot of other services and consume themselves. All this fear and panic and paranoia as well causes people to stay home and spend less and save more. It has a huge knock-on effect, and they're warning here that because the global economy is only growing at a rate of 3% in 2019, were fear to take hold of public attitudes, growth could easily sink below 2.5% this year, which is the level the IMF considers qualifies as a global recession. And that has an impact on democracy, on politics, on so many other things.
I mean, there are 2 points, I think. There's the economic point, and then there's the fact that this is incredibly transmissible. This really is spreading quite fast, and it's hanging like a sword of Damocles over the likes of Africa or South Asia, for example. You know, if it starts to spread into those continents, then a lot of people are at risk, at real risk. And when the workshop of the world, China is the workshop of the world, is closed, you know, that's 17% of the global economy. That is integrated into so many different supply chains, you know, very much so in the likes of Germany. So it's affecting the Eurozone as well. The knock-on effects could be immense. And this is, you know, not even...
The SARS outbreak knocked 2 percentage points off Chinese growth and took a percentage point, I think, off global GDP as well. So, you know, there is an effect to other things. Even if you manage to get on top of this virus, and it looks like the mortality rate is slightly decreased what it was in the first couple of weeks, and it looks like it's not as transmissible as first feared, has to be face-to-face contact of some sort. But it's still, there are other issues. Even if it stops being a pandemic, and it isn't allowed to become a pandemic, there's still the issue of the fact that China's been shut down.
And I think there are still a lot of questions actually about transmission. They're still learning about this virus, aren't they?
Sure,
and I should add as well that just actually in the last hour or so, we've learned that China has now updated some of the figures. They said 719 people have now died from the coronavirus worldwide. There are now more than 30,000 cases in 26 different countries. So that's the latest state of play there. And we haven't touched on the issue of tourism as well, of course, for China, with lots of airlines not flying in and out of the country as well. So lots of very serious issues. Obviously, people's health is the main concern at the moment, but the economy one as well. Let's move on finally to a story that you spotted inside the Daily Mail, and one that will cheer up a lot of tea drinkers, I'm sure. Tell us what it's about.
So apparently, having a nice cuppa will be more beneficial than you actually reckon it could be. It's the solution to curbing the middle-age spread. Tea drinkers apparently have less fat around their tummies. This is a study of 5,681 people. Now, if it really is as simple as that, I think a lot of us will be reaching for the stars, punching the air. But I'm not quite sure we should...
Well, yeah, but if you drink lots and lots of tea, it doesn't mean you get thinner and thinner and thinner, especially if you have half-pack custard creams with it. If you're a regular tea drinker, you've probably got 1.5% less body fat or less fat around your tummy. And they don't know if that's because of the tea and some element within the tea which is causing you perhaps not to put on fat, or whether if you're a regular tea drinker, it perhaps means you're more active anyway. Personally, I think coffee drinkers are all mad.
It says it could include black, milky, or green tea. So it's not even like it's a specific type, which sounds extraordinary.
Yeah, and it says they've had a look at results to take out any confounding figures from people who'd put milk or honey in your tea, or sugar in it. So, you know, we don't know the impact of custard creams, and that's why I think the scientists really need to divert their energies and make sure that too is healthy and good for you.
Not good.
Jaffa cakes are one of your 5 a day, so perhaps we could move there.
Okay, no, really interesting, because it says it may be that people who enjoy a cup of tea live healthier lives, and this may be helping them to keep the weight off. So, really interesting findings, but we're not quite sure what it means.
No.
All I know is I'm going to go home and have a cup of tea very
Me
shortly.
too.
Good stuff. But anyway, good to see you both. Susie and Darren, thanks very much indeed.